Hello and welcome to this episode of Read Play Game, where we look at tabletop role-playing games from every side of the table. Today we are joined by Mikey Hamm, designer of Slugblaster. Mikey, we are so excited to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Yay.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk.
We had really such a delightful time playing this game. I said before we officially started, but Anish GM'd, and the fast-paced nature of the game was so fun. Especially we had just played, which we had also a great time with. We had just played Wander Home.
Yeah.
Which it being such a calm and take your time with it game, and then going into Slugblaster that was get up and go was for me a very nice juxtaposition.
Yeah, totally. Two great flavors that taste great one after each other.
Yeah, 0 to 100.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great.
And we had an incredible time. For me, I grew up on Sonic Riders, loved that game.
Oh yeah.
And I poured all that influence into the game itself.
Okay, I have beef with that game though. I'll tell you why. Because when I was 8 years old, I drew a Sonic the Hedgehog character that had a skateboard, and I mailed it to SEGA, and I said, "This is my idea. You can have it and use it, but you need to send me a Sega Genesis with 2 controllers and 2 games." And they sent me back a letter that said no, but thank you for sending us the drawing. And the Sega logo was on the letterhead, and I remember just thinking that is the coolest thing ever. And then a few years later, all these skateboarding and styled inspired Sonic games start coming out, and I am mad. So
yeah,
listen,
it's
Sega.
no one had ever thought of giving a skateboard to a cartoon character, right? So
until you,
that's your idea.
The first one. And Sega, there is still time to make this right.
Sega,
if you're listening
watching
to this right now,
I would actually value a Sega Genesis more than ever. So
yes.
Make it happen.
Actually, can we all get one Sega? I think
for
each of us.
Right. A round of Genesis is on the house.
Yeah.
There's some interest that is owed at this point.
So I guess that already tells us a little bit about your first kind of experience with game design, or putting it
maybe an early one.
Yeah, exactly.
But for our listenership, could you just give a brief introduction or overview of what you do in the game design world?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I designed. I mean, primarily my first and main game is Slugblaster, and I started working on that real early. I mean, there are proto versions of it from 2016, but I did my first Kickstarter in 2020, and then it came out a couple years later. And since then, I've done a bit of guest writing on some other games, and I have one smaller game that came out last year called Two Hand Path. And that's so far, that is my catalog.
I know, what a debut game with Slugblaster. Well, yeah, taking the world back to storm.
You have two options. You can either put out 5 games, and your 4th or 5th might really finally be the way you want it, or you can just remake your game 4 or 5 times and then put it out, right? So
yeah. I think the best games, personally, in my opinion, are the ones that feel so personal, so specific. And that, honestly, whenever I read Slugblaster, I was so excited to bring it to the group. But that as a first game is
a
wild
beast.
To me.
Yeah.
That's a beast. And I'm curious. Yeah. I'm just so curious. Beyond Slugblaster, is there anything that drew you into the world of game design before all this? What was your path to it?
I mean, I not much different than I think any gamer or most, but because I started playing Dungeons and Dragons when I was 14, and then played pretty much every 2 weeks for like the last, whatever, how old am I? Yeah, like 20 plus years, right? Like,
Can you manage to keep that schedule? That's
well,
a feat. that is nuts.
Honestly, we should be interviewing you about that.
no, honestly, truly, that is actually the most, like, if you want to talk about like success bias, that is like one of mine. Is that I happen to be lucky enough that I had like a group all through high school that we met like regularly, except for like the occasional break or whatever when someone was away. And then when I moved to Edmonton at age 20, I right away found a group just, and that group was all like older guys, like at the time in their 40s or whatever. So they all had very stable lives, right? And this was like just their poker night, and I was the little baby in the group. But having that really stable schedule of just like, without fail every 2 weeks, if you can't show up, that's fine, but like it's going to be happening. I didn't realize how like much of a unicorn that is in gaming until I kind of got more into the community and started talking to people, and they're like, the hardest thing is just getting a group together, right? So that's huge, because then gameplay just like, and how things work at a table really get a chance to just like dig down deep into your DNA and just the way you think about things. And right now, this is the first time in like since then that I haven't been able to play regularly. My wife has a new job. I take care of my kids in the afternoons and evenings, and I just can't do it right now. Yeah. So I've taken a break from it for a while, and I now am starting to get imposter syndrome about designing games, because I'm like, am I even authorized to do this if I am not currently playing these kind of games? But at the same time, it's like that stuff is just so like a part of the way I think now that I think that helps. I mean, we'll see. I probably got to get back to the table soon, but
yeah, I mean, I'm extremely jealous that you had a game like that.
No, I mean, I understand.
Especially we all started playing in college, and like college has got to be one of the worst places to schedule it, and then it only continues for the rest of your life.
Yeah, we had to make a podcast to get a stable schedule going. Like,
for sure. Yeah, you got to find some older people like that. They got their shit together, and they just don't have anything else going on. So you gotta find those gray-haired gamers. They'll keep it going for you. Absolutely.
Anish was talking about how specific the game was, and that was something that we noticed while playing it. It seemed so rooted in lived experiences. Can you tell us about the inspiration behind Slugblaster specifically?
Sure. Yeah. Well, you're totally right. It really is like a part memoir for sure. And like, yeah, it started as it started as a short story I wrote in college, like in 2010. And from there, that was where the beginning of that world of just this idea of a kid in a small prairie town who was just a stand-in for me, and his parents were mine and all that stuff. And then to make it interesting for me to write, because I like literature, but I find it hard to start writing or start reading, because I'm like, this is like, is there going to be a dragon in this or not? Right. Like, yeah. But once you get in, you're obviously like, oh, like the lives of actual people are as vibrant and interesting as any fantasy stuff, but it takes a while to like convince our little child brains of that. Right. Mm-hmm. So, I added this sci-fi layer where I thought like, okay, this will be fun. Just have this kid with like dealing with normal, like 14-year-old kid stuff. But then he's also this, his creativity, instead of the way it was for me, like building Lego and playing role-playing games, his is that he makes these sci-fi devices or whatever. So that was the premise of the story. It was just the contrast and interplay between that kind of fantastical element and the very mundane, like having a conversation with his mom in the kitchen. She keeps trying to give him vitamins, so that's where it started. And then I wrote another story or two, and mostly just kept trying to turn that into a novel. And I just kept fleshing out the world, thinking about the world over the the next few years and really trying to write a novel multiple times. And just, novels are hard. And so I got the brilliant idea eventually to just turn that world and make a role-playing game, because we all know role-playing games are very easy to make. So never intended for it to turn into like a 160-page book ever, but that's just, the thing about me is I can get obsessive, and I can get kind of manic and then overambitious and get sort of over my skis with stuff. And we'll talk about that when we talk about advice to new designers, I guess. But I'm also the kind of person who doesn't like to give up, especially when other people are like watching me. So I have some like good old fashioned like Mennonite work ethic to prove to myself and my father, I guess. So I stick with things and just keep grinding away at them. And so that's how it eventually happened. Right. But yeah, it was supposed to be a novel and then just couldn't do it. So
grinding like a rail.
Oh, I couldn't hear you, Jess.
Oh, dang it.
And now I can.
I just said grinding like a rail. Like,
oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
you
gotta
load bearing.
Yeah, got to 5-0 that project. Yeah.
I'm curious about what led you specifically to the Forged in the Dark system, because it does kind of make sense with the amount of like lore that seemed to be packed into all of this. So I'm curious, sort of what led you to that specifically, and what other systems might have had influence there.
Yeah, totally. So, like I said, I played D&D since I was very young, and I really enjoyed making my own stuff for it, dabbling with that kind of stuff, like a lot of people do, but never really was never thought I would like really make my own role-playing game once I was out of high school. I was more interested in making music and stuff. But then when I realized that maybe this would make a good role-playing game, I didn't really know a lot of indie games yet. So I first started with some real basic stuff that I thought I invented completely, and would later find out is like, it was, basically just like the basics of like indie role-playing, from maybe 15 years ago. It was pretty validating, because I did feel like, oh, hey, I guess I'm onto something, but that thing was 10 years ago. So, So I started with like a D10 pool system, and then a year later I was like, no, let's try a card-based role-playing game. That's cool, and I tried that for a while, and all these things were cool and had some cool ideas, but I was still learning, right? So and I'm a kind of a perfectionist, and I mean that derogatory, truly, not a humble brag. It's I really wish I had been able to just put out that first version, because even though I love the version that's out, I think I would have had a more rewarding design career if I hadn't been sort of stuck for that long in that first game thing. But that's the same thing that happened with me with music, because I took like 7 years to write an album, and in the end I really liked it. But like I kind of was like, I wish I had written like 7 albums, because then I'd have all those to like listen to and enjoy, right? So but then I was like, I found Forged in the Dark when I started getting into like learning about indie games. I found Blades in the Dark because I needed to save a D&D campaign that had gone off the rails, with my players wanted to start doing all these heists and all this stuff that D&D is just not built for. Yeah. So I found Blades in the Dark and was like, this is perfect, and had them switch everything over to that. And then as I was reading about it, I was like, okay, this would make a lot of sense for Slugblaster. And it was for pretty simple things at first, like, hey, there's crews, skateboarders have crews, like really like superficial things that actually really weren't probably what I should have been looking at when I was picking a system. It did work out for me, because Blades in the Dark also is really good with like cinematic action and that kind of stuff. But you can tell by how much of Blades in the Dark I don't include in Slugblaster that really a lot of the stuff that I still find so exciting about Blades in the Dark wasn't even really necessary for the game I was going to make. But I just got lucky that the sort of the core mechanic actually just is so good for fast-paced action, right? So
I think that it's really cool having knowledge of Blades of the Dark. Like I've also played Blades of the Dark and like read the book a decent amount. But like I loved seeing the comparison and noticing the things that you did include and change and the things that you left out, because I think that really informs that. Like for example, the kick and boost mechanic I think was so interesting. And I felt that like, and the check it. We were talking about the check it as well. Yeah. It just that really helped the pace.
Every 2 seconds.
Yeah, I really love those mechanics. I am curious about those specifically. I know we have other questions.
Yeah,
but I kind of.
Oh yeah. Well, the kick and boost thing, that was like actually a holdover from my very first like thing I wanted, like back in the early versions of the game before Forged in the Dark. One of my sort of main ideas that I really wanted is I didn't like this moment that we often have in role-playing games where someone would, I guess we call it weaseling in Blades in the Dark, where you're always trying to angle to use your top stat or whatever skill. And I found there was often like some awkward stuff around that. And I also I didn't like them I didn't like when you rolled a character, you're like, I want to be a hacker. And then you wait all session for hacking to happen. And while everyone else is having fun running around shooting things and you didn't take any shooting skills. And then you get to the one moment where you get to hack and then you roll badly and you don't, right? So I was like, I'd always envisioned a system where you have instead a resource pool that you can choose how to dole it out. And so if your thing that you really want to do is very specific, you can choose to just save that resource and wait for that one opportunity. And then you're like, oh, okay. Like this is the thing. Like I'm the hacker. This is my chance. I'm going to use all my boost, all my kick to make this work. Whereas if you want to play someone who's just like good at skateboarding or something like that, you instead have opportunities to dole that out throughout the thing and just be a generally pretty competent skateboarder through a lot of those scenes. So I'd kind of been like, hey, that's kind of self-balancing. That's kind of cool. And so I'd always had that idea and I really wanted to put it in. So I just kind of made it. It was like, that was one thing where I was like, I'm like, mine is going to have this. Like I never wrote a Slugblaster skill list or action list ever. Cause I was like, I'm not doing that. And also because it was kind of this new genre for me where I was like, I don't really know what these characters are going to be doing. Like what kind of actions are they going to be rolling? And I didn't really want to decide that. So I was like, I'm going to leave it real open and just like see what kind of play people do. Right. And now that I've seen enough games, I probably could write a skill list if I needed to, but it works this way and people like it. So
yeah.
People like it. I think our game group, we love to roll. Like any excuse to roll,
yes,
we will
me too.
take. And this game, in its stripped down version of Forged in the Dark, gave us such permission to essentially embody those teenagers that are just like, fuck it. Yeah. And just like do something random.
Good, yeah.
I think at one point I used a check it moment to catch a piece of popcorn in my mouth and to impress another teenager. And it was great.
Exactly how it's supposed to work. Exactly. I agree. I love rolling dice and it was very interesting to me when I started designing this game and playtesting. And there are people who don't. Like, there are people who they want as few dice rolls as possible while they play. And so, for example, when they play Blades in the Dark, I think Harper might be like this, which is totally valid. But I think he sort of designed that game where you have this conversation, and it can be quite a big conversation before the roll, right? Because you want to really establish every single stake.
Yeah.
Every single thing and build this one roll up to be super important. And then you roll it and there's this sort of release when you do that. And I think that's so cool. That's not how I play. I like to just I don't want to make any decision on my own. I want everything just to be like, let's see, and I'll roll the dice, right? So I almost love like a mechanics first type gameplay for myself, where it's just like, my favorite thing about role playing is I like to interpret dice, right? Like I love to roll the dice and then let them okay, so what does that mean in the fiction, right? Whereas fiction first, gamers like to do the opposite, right? They like to establish a case. So like, what would happen and what do we want to happen? Okay. And so how would that inform what we roll, right?
Yeah.
And I'm very the opposite. So I think you can play Slugblaster both ways, but it came from my heart to play it the way you are, with just like, let's roll, right? So
it's interesting with the like boost and kick, with kick affecting the like impact of your roll, because I think when you're in that kind of touchy situation where you want to build up that tension, you can be more explicit with like, what does the kick mean here? What's the impact?
Totally.
But I noticed when we were playing, a lot of that was pretty unspoken. Like, I like with that popcorn roll, I called check it before throwing a piece of popcorn, and I don't think we said it, but my assumption with the check it is like, if I fail this, I'm probably going to choke. Like, it's like, fully, I'm going to choke because I'm making it more risky. Yeah. But it was very fast-paced for us.
And that's another difference of playstyle too, is that a lot of people, when they like play something like Blades in the Dark, they find it more beneficial, and in some ways even like a lot of players prefer this out of a player agency thing, if they want to know what the consequence is going to be if they fail. I, as a player, love the surprise and the thrill of being like, oh, I failed. What's the GM, like, what's he got, right? Like, and as a GM, I also like that. I want to see the roll first, and then I'll tell you what happens, right? I like that kind of pulp action adventure, like surprise type gameplay, whereas other people like a more like dread building, suspense building style. So yeah, totally. And the check it, it's funny, the rule was there from like very early on in some form, but the actual words check it were like a very last minute add.
It's perfect.
because I had this design problem of people would always kind of forget to say, and it still happens, but a little less so now, forget to say that they were trying to do a trick or trying to, get style. And they'd forget until after the roll, which kind of is like cheating, quote unquote, because you could be like, oh no!
Now that I've succeeded,
I wasn't trying to do a trick. I wasn't. So you need to risk something, and like you need to sort of like put your chips on the table. And I needed and old versions of the rule, you would like add a special colored dice to it, and so it was like very clear that you were trying to roll a trick. In this version of that rule, that didn't exist anymore. So I needed some way to kind of like make that proclaim that, right? And so I was like, I'll just have them say a very like noticeable thing before they do it. And people still forget, but it's fun to do, so people tend to remember now, right? So
yeah, it's just like it feels really cool to do. Just saying it as you, even if you fail, but like at least you tried.
Especially if you fail.
It's so funny to say check it and then fall on your face. Like that's
absolutely,
and that's part of skateboarding, right? Is a lot of failure and getting hurt. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I was just going to comment sort of on what you were saying earlier about the way that you like to pass the consequences like to the GM and stuff like that. I think that what's also really cool about the system is that you do kind of get the best of both worlds with the trouble aspect, where you can kind of like, maybe you won't know what's going to happen, but you can sort of negotiate afterward, like the severity of different like consequences and stuff by emptying that on the later part of the game, and then you do that circles around to become a very like important plot and interesting thing, which I guess we do have questions about that too. So if someone wants to ask about that as well, we can. I don't know. I just think it's really cool.
You can't choose if bad things happen to you, but you can choose when and sort of how bad things happen to you, right? So I don't know what to say about it though, but it's fun.
It works.
If you have questions about it, I can try to figure out what I was thinking about.
But Anish, you had a thought before.
No, I haven't, but I'm curious about this line of thought because I love jumping to different thoughts. The beats and arcs that feed into like the trouble mechanic. Yeah, I'm finding that a lot of the games I like out of the ones we play use mechanics not just as like the thing that moves the game forward, but like they rhetorically are effective in telling the kind of story that the game is all about. Like when you yell check it, I feel
Yeah.
like a sick teenager.
Right,
And
yeah.
when I keep accumulating problem and stress and trouble
And pushing it off.
and pushing it off, when we get to the downtime, the beats and arcs are, maybe to me as the GM, the most fun part to see.
Oh, as a GM, for sure, because you finally you get a break, right? You get to
relax.
You get to like finally like drink that beer that you've been like forgetting about while you've been like, yeah, I know. That's no, I love that type of play mode switch because as a GM, because it can be so exhausting. So yeah, no, I agree. Like that part's fun because then you just get to watch the players go, right? And you can chime in, but the spotlight has really shifted, right? Or like the amount of talking you have to do is changed. So
yeah, but beyond all that too, I mean, the actual arcs that are written out
and like the tonal shift.
Yeah, the tonal shift.
Super engaging. Super engaging.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I love that I love all those kind of stories, right? I think teenagers are the most interesting people on the planet. And it's one of the most interesting times in a person's life. And I think it makes sense that we have so many stories about them. And I love coming of age stories. I love all that stuff. And I just thought, yeah, and we have so many games about teenagers now, which is awesome. And at the time that I was doing it, I didn't know about a lot of them. So to me, I was like, I felt almost this responsibility to represent this genre as well as I could in the game by like putting as many of like the classic sort of tropes and arcs that I would see in these movies and television shows into the game. So I had a lot of fun making those because it was just like, yeah, it was like, oh, I know the kind of stories I like. Like I'm gonna put them in here, and then the challenge was just trying to make them also squishy enough that people could do their own thing with them, right? And your mileage may vary on that one depending on how much of specificity or agency you like in your games. But I just wanted to write that stuff, so I did it.
I think they were general enough that you really can apply them to like whatever kind of story you want because they are so recognizable. But it's like you gave such a variety of examples as well. Like I remember in our episode, I played I was the heart, I believe. Mm-hmm. And I was looking at the examples. I was like, oh yeah, this is like kind of like a protagonist type class. These are all protagonists. And then someone pointed out like, those aren't all protagonists. There's these like it had like Starfire from Teen Titans. It had like plenty of other characters that aren't. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is a very specific sort of trope, but it's also very broad. And so you can put 100 things in there.
That is a great point. I never thought about that the heart often isn't the protagonist, right? Like it sometimes, but not always. That's a lot of times they're like the support. They're the character that the protagonist needs to have their breakthrough or whatever. Like they're the one that like brings that out of them. That's cool. Yeah. Never thought about that.
For ours, I did play a very protagonist type character,
and
I was inspired
because
by the
you're the protagonist of the group, right? Of your real life.
Because you listed in the media references Ben 10, and I saw that, and I was like, oh my god, I want to play a Ben 10 type character so bad.
Totally,
that was so fun.
Ben 10's awesome.
My favorite shows growing up.
You talked about balancing player agency and then flexibility in the beats, and I just wanted to touch on that. Was I think that was very successful. All three of us as players did the family. I don't remember what the arc is called, but the initial one and the Trouble at Home. Yeah. And wildly different stories.
Oh, good. Yeah.
That, like, it all worked out. And we also did the, like, specific character beats.
Good.
We did a ton because it was so helpful.
No, that's good to hear. Yeah. Especially with the family beats, I was really conscious of that because, like, my family growing up is so different than the families you often see in these shows where the parents are like kind of bad, or like, or yeah, like, or the kids really don't have a good relationship with their parents. Like I grew up with like a very like loving kind of chill family in a lot of ways. And so those moments that like, so when I was thinking of that arc, I was like, I need, could like, can I see myself in this arc? It needs to be, yeah, it needs to not just be like the big screaming, like you're grounded, this type of thing. It also needs to be it has to be able to work as a more subtle one too. Like if the arc is just that the parent is like a little disappointed, right? And because that can be just as brutal, you just happen to be in a family that's a little gentler, right? But that doesn't mean that the same exact arc isn't happening. It's just happening at a lower volume, right? So I wanted to really provide opportunities for, yeah, I guess that's what I was thinking. I was like, would this work with my family? And then would it work with the family I see on TV, which I'm sure is also a lot of people relate to that kind of family too, right? So
we had a very, I think we all had very different ideas of the family dynamics, because we had a moment where one of our characters did specify in their backstory that they had kind of a rough home life, but I don't think that Emma anticipated exactly
I grew up in such a stable home.
Yeah.
And the four of us that were playing we're all actors. We all have all acted together. And Tori, who's not on the call, stood in for my mother and just knocked it out of the park.
Oh, wow.
And I was like,
terrifying.
I've never experienced this. I'm experiencing it for the first time. It was like,
oh yeah.
What was the quote they said?
I'm unsafe.
They just like locked right in from the beginning. It was
it was like guess who decided to show up was the first
who decided to show up.
Brutal.
Like,
oh wow, yeah.
And I was playing the chill, so it was a really interesting.
The contrast.
It was a great time. But,
yeah.
Like a lot.
We all have that experience, right? When we went over to like a friend's house and realized like the dynamic of their family is so different, right? Yeah. And it's like, yeah, you go over to like the friend's house where they all just fight all the time, like, but at the same time, they don't seem, the things they're saying all the time seem crazy, but the way everyone's reacting, you realize like, oh, okay, this isn't as bad. Like if I said one of these things in my household, it would like be the thing of the year. Whereas they're just saying it all the time, like these arguments or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's really cool.
That blows your mind when you're in like 4th grade. It's like you can say that word to your mom.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I know.
Oh, but something that was really helpful for me as a GM was under the GMing notes, like those questions about tone. To really set the mood. Any GM who's going to do Slugblaster, I recommend going through that list. But I'm curious if you have any other recommendations for that kind of game where it can go from like the run, which is like super rad, kickflips everywhere, and then shift to, oh my God, there's family drama that is happening right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think the most helpful thing would probably be to do some assigned like reading, I guess, and just have them watch stuff like the Spider-Verse movies or something that does play with that tone where you can have Spider Pig in one scene, but then you can have like truly some of the best family drama, most touching family drama scenes like 15 minutes later, right? And I think that's the best way. I mean, I put those tone questions in because during play tests, I realized people couldn't read my mind and they didn't know what kind of game I was making, especially since, again, it's kind of a weird sort of newer genre of, like it's a proto genre right now, kind of, right? And so I put those in because a lot of people would come in generally sillier than I am imagining. That tends to still be the thing, and I've kind of had to accept that, okay, people just see this sillier than I do, and that's totally okay. They're having so much fun, and their games sound amazing, but I realized like, okay, I got to do a little more work to get people understanding kind of the tone I'm going for. So I put those tone questions in as a way to kind of show like these are the different ways you can do it, and kind of slightly put my thumb on the scale of like, hey, I think you should do kind of like Spider-Verse like style, like that. And that touchstone didn't come out until I was like close to finishing this game. And when it did, I was like, yes, good. Yes, this is perfect. Like I can show. And then when Everything Everywhere All at Once came out, I was just like, okay, they said everything I've ever wanted to say. This is great. I can relax. Like I can just have the silly skateboarding game. I don't have to write the the thesis on
the
multiversional existentialism. And yeah, exactly. So, but those touchstones really help because they show, they show the difference between, it's subtle, but like Everything Everywhere All at Once is very Slugblaster in that things are really gonzo, but they're not really silly. Like everything is very visually crazy, but there's some real stakes to it and some real like pretty dark existential stuff going on, right? And I think that's closer to what I always imagined it. But again, I don't know. It's your game. Like I hope you have, and to be fair, like there are lots, the way I write and the way I like to be funny, a lot of the jokes I write in the paragraph kind of send the signal that this could be a sillier game, right? Whereas I'm just trying to make jokes, they often I'm realizing that I actually kind of allowed for that silliness by some of the examples I make just while I'm joking around in the text, right? So
one of my favorite things to happen in any media, this is something I talked a lot when I directed, because I would often direct comedies. It's like the moment where you're laughing and you're laughing and you're laughing until suddenly it's not funny anymore and you like catch yourself. And that's what it felt like, especially doing a first session, was the run was very silly, goofy stakes, but like it was the kids escaping the reality of life, so it was very fast-paced.
Totally.
And then the downtime was like, oh, we're in it now.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that thematically growing just beautifully over the course of a campaign. You know, if you're getting back into the loop of it, trying to get back to that like high of the silly goofy, and you're like that push and pull.
This is a game that needs to be played
like,
repeatedly. Like it was so fun as a one shot. Anybody listening should play this game to completion because there are the beats and arcs that are set up, and like, God, it's just so satisfying to do it over and over again. I'm so glad you feel that way. That makes me really happy to know that you are having a good time. I think there's something about playing a teenager. You really become connected with that character and invested in them. Like you feel like you're caring for them in a way. And so, there's a pretty good return on emotional investment with Slugblaster, with those characters. 'Cause you just like, you want to see things work out for them so badly. And the game doesn't always let that happen. So it can be kind of, it works really good over a few sessions. And that tone stuff, it's so funny that it seems like such a hard needle to thread, but I found it just sort of happens organically too in play. Like, because people, when you give them the chance to do something crazy and funny and silly, they do it. When you give them the chance to do something like real and emotional, they also do it, right? Like, so it's, people get it, like the tone problems that I've seen with it are generally pretty minor, and they usually happen during one shots. Because as you play more, those characters start seeming more real. You like, the game starts grounding itself. And that's just, I think it's just the way players play, right? People tell stories that way. Like it's hard to not end up telling like a real human story, right? Because we are real humans, right? So
I think that's a classic experience in a lot of tabletop role-playing games where it's like, oh yeah, even if I made my stupid silly character, eventually it gets like it gets real. It's
totally.
like
Me with Danny the Warthog DeVito, my first D&D.
Yeah, for sure.
Ugh. Okay, well, we've been talking about how much we love playing the game and watching the game. When you get to watch people playtest the game, or when you're playing the game yourself, what's your favorite part of the experience? We want to know.
What I love is I just love seeing people create characters, because everyone had this different experience growing up, right? And everyone tends to bring their own stuff into it. They bring what they were like as a teenager, or what they wish they were like as a teenager, or, all these things. And it's really cool. It's also super, and just playing people of different generations, because they bring their own, Slugblaster takes place in this, like, what I say, it takes place in this, like, kind of non-time, right? Just of like somewhere between the 80s and the now, right? But obviously I am, 39, so the game is very like Y2K in the stuff I put in. Even so, I'm kind of like, I say one thing but I did another thing, right? But I think the reason is because, like, that's just the childhood I knew, right? And so that's what everyone else brings. So people of different generations, they bring their own stuff in. I mean, one of the most pivotal moments in Slugblaster's trajectory was an early playtest when these kids got to Vestige. And I asked them, okay, guys, you guys are in a new world. What do you do? And one player said, I take out my phone and I take a selfie. And for some reason, probably because I didn't get a cell phone until I was 19, I didn't ever think about that. That, like, of course, these kids are going to be taking selfies and pictures and like all that stuff. And that, of course, now seems like a huge part of the game. That wasn't always part of the game. At that point, I was like, I don't know, what are they going to do? Fight like pirates, like fight like bounty hunters and stuff. I didn't know. I was still figuring it out. And when that happened, I was like, oh, right. Okay. This is about clout. Like, these kids are doing this for the sake of doing it, right? Like, they're not trying to find like the answer to the multiverse, although some people do that stuff. But this is mostly about, like, the same reason kids break into abandoned buildings is just to do it, right? So, so that's my favorite thing, is just seeing the things I never would have thought of that people bring to their characters. It's cool. I could watch character creation like videos like all the time, because it's just the most exciting part, and I don't stress out listening to them try to figure out my rules, because it's just the purity of character creation. And I'm not like, oh, right, I should have explained that better. Oh no, they're doing it wrong. Oh no, it's my fault, right? So yeah, I like that part.
There was a big choice during character creation that had a big, like, I think, influence, or a choice, a thing that none of us expected, I think, a character to bring, which was Tori's character. They described him as looking like a magic wand, just in his appearance. Like, he wears all black and has like white hair or whatever.
Oh my goodness.
And then like
cool.
Eventually decided that I guess he does like fire tricks, like magic fire tricks. Yeah. So then we eventually like landed on, okay, well then our crew is doing like a hybrid skate video. Certainly the weirdos. Yeah. Hybrid skate videos, David Blaine type videos where we're doing magic tricks on skateboards.
Amazing.
And then my character was like super obsessed with animals, so it was also kind of like a Steve Irwin kind of like, it was just this like weird blend of things, and it's like, well, this is where it's going, I guess.
So totally. Weird, non-traditional, like the heart path. Instead of finding somebody to love, it's loving an animal.
Yeah,
that's like, great. That's great though. Like that. No, I love that. Okay, that's my new favorite. That's my answer. That one. That's my favorite thing.
It was a gummy worm.
A Wilkie's.
Spoiler, but it was a Wilkie's.
It was a big
like
dragon thing. Yeah.
Oh my god, that's incredible.
Because like my character was, like I said, sort of like a Ben 10, but also like an Ash Ketchum type character, where I'm like, I just want to see all these cool animals.
Yeah, that's great. That's really cool.
It was delightful.
But there's something so quintessential about like the desire to like film yourself. Like that's so skate culture, I think.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
I watched this movie.
Deck It.
Something so like ragtag, scrappy videos, either if it's on your iPhone or a
Yeah.
camcorder, it's like quintessential skate spirit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And it's like where danger and pain and all that stuff is like the point, right? To teenagers. Like it's like especially that kind of teenager. So yeah, no, totally. It kind of was I remember because an old version of the system had this pretty punishing like wound system that I in reality probably didn't fit the game, but it was just I thought it was cool and blah blah blah. And I was trying to figure out like why would this be in a game where you're playing like kids? And that's when I was like, oh right, like skateboarders like get hurt and they love it,
like,
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, okay, this actually works. So I was I was trying to like crowbar a mechanic in, and I kind of while doing that, I discovered a whole new sort of like side to this subculture in the game, right? So it started to become more and more clear, and that's when I was like, "Hey, this is all about skateboarding culture, like, or that, or it's its cousins, right?" So
We have been, this has been a great conversation. I want to be respectful of time, but I want to make sure that we hit for listeners who are getting into game design or getting into RPGs. One of the big questions that we wanted to, and I might combine two questions here, is you touched on it earlier of what do you think indie game designers should consider as they're designing a game, building up to the release of their games, challenges that you faced? And then the second one is that, do you have any game recommendations for us to play?
no problem. For sure. Advice. Well, if you're like me and you sort of struggle with perfectionism and that kind of thing, I guess the thing I'll just remind you is like the game you're making right now is gonna just be like not every change is an improvement. Sometimes it's just a change. Eventually you'll get to a point where you just finally are ready to move to the next step. I would love to encourage you to do that sooner than later. I also know that it just might be, you might just have to be working through it, right? So don't worry, just keep working on it. You'll get it. Like you're learning the whole time, no matter what you're doing, you're learning. I just think you'll learn more if you kind of push yourself ahead in the process more than you think. Like you might not think you're ready for playtesting. You are. You can playtest with a piece of paper that says we're going to play a game about like draconic spies or whatever. You can write that on a piece of paper, get a group of friends together, and just make it up just try playing that for an hour. You will figure out things about your game that you can't figure out just in the shower or on walks, right? Like you kind of have to push yourself out of your comfort zone. So I guess that's what I would say. But then kind of to contrast that, a very practical thing is like, I'd suggest if you get to a point where you want to like go to Kickstarter or something like that, in that case, I would say try to get your game as close to done, if not done, before you do that. If you can't afford the art and stuff right now, just put blank boxes, do whatever you can to get as much of your work done before you do Kickstarter, because I had to do so much work after the Kickstarter, like 2 years. It was such a stressful time because it is not good for the creative process to be feeling pressure and the expectation of like, oh, people already paid for this, so I have to make it worth their money. So I have to make it really good, but now it's late. So now I have to make it really good because they're waiting for it. And it becomes this vicious psychological spiral. So I would suggest for your first one, make a tiny, tiny game and finish it and then kickstart that. Like that's such a much, much, much nicer process. That's what I would say. So, and then game recommendations. Yes, I have some. If you like games about kids and small towns and stuff like that, my friend Jex has a game called Bump in the Dark. That's kind of like, I guess like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer type thing. You're in this town, you're solving mysteries, X-Files, all that stuff. And it's super cool. It's also a Forged in the Dark game. So that's how I met Jex. I met a lot of my game design friends. We met in the Blades in the Dark hacking Discord. I'd also suggest, basically, yeah, any game by Gem Room Games. They are a couple out of Portland that make just these delightful, rad little games. Some of them not so little, and all very Slugblaster, in spirit. Games like Subway Runners, which is a Forged in the Dark game, or High Magic Low Lives, which is kind of this. It's like Slugblaster, but with like dungeon crawling, I guess, because there's rules for cell phone use, which I didn't discover until after Slugblaster was out, and I was so mad because I was like, man, some of these would have been awesome. But yeah, like rules for like how to use your cell phone while you're like fighting like undead in a mall and stuff. So that Gem Room Games, they have just these awesome little games, and they all have amazing names like Neutron Axe and stuff like that. So I'm always jealous of everything they put out. So I would suggest that. That's what I would do.
Okay. In our interviews, we usually, if we have a little bit of time, we like to ask some fun questions at the end.
Sure,
surprise you.
Hit me.
Quickest question.
Okay.
You make up the dopest term, Slugmaster, to describe the GM. Can I ask, why is it only used 3 times in the entire rulebook? All on the same page.
It's like a little joke. And we were like, no, Slugmaster.
No.
I don't know. I guess. So I guess in some ways I have this. I try to adhere to something I call like humble design, which a lot of times means like. If there's something that works, I don't need to change it. And I think the term GM totally works and is good and whatever. And so I didn't want to use it. And I didn't want to have like a bespoke like term.
Sure. Dungeon Master with D&D, like we'll be doing the Slug Master.
Yeah, I don't know, because you're right, it is so fun. I was like, you call it a GM, it's fun. Like I don't know. I
know that we did call it Slug Master.
Good, and I think a lot of people do, and I think that's great. I just I didn't want to come up with like special words for like dice and special words. I don't know. I try to, if a word works, I try to keep it, just because it reduces the learning curve. But I do agree that it's pretty good, and I can't remember if I came up with it or if the actual play group Quantum Kickflip came up with it in an early play test. I'll have to see about that. But yeah, no, I do love it. So.
It's here to stay.
Yeah, it's here to stay. Yeah, okay, there we go.
Do you have any like upcoming other things that you would like to plug?
Thinking
here
about
at the end?
time.
Yeah, if you would like to talk about any of your stuff.
Plug any cool projects.
Sure, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I guess the main thing is we are doing an expansion for Slugblaster that drops. I mean, it's a couple days from this recording. It's the Kickstarter,
it's already out.
It's up on Backer. It's out. Yeah, you can back it on BackerKit right now. It's called Slime, Warp, and Solder. It's this 3-zine box set. So so there's Slime, there's Warp, and there's Solder, and there's these 3 zines. Jace, aka Sex on a Pizza, who did the cover art for Slugblaster, they're doing the entire like art direction for the whole thing and all the illustration. So it has like a super unified, like specific art style that is just so rad. And and we're just packing it full of fun new stuff, new signatures, including like signature powers and stuff, which is something I'd always wanted in the game but couldn't fit in. So you can be like a telepath, or you can be like or you can have like a monster pet, or be someone who can turn into a monster, a la Turning Red or something like that. So cool. Expanding it out into that kind of stuff away from just tech. And then of course there's gonna be tons of new like monsters and gear and sample runs and all sorts of tables and stuff, and it'll be pretty fun. We're doing some fun swag too, like pogs, and like inevitably pogs are finally being done, and it's gonna be pretty cool. I'm pretty excited about it. So you can back that and get that. It should be shipping to you in fall or sometime around there. So
I will for sure be doing that. Since we played the game for the podcast, I have a long-term running Dungeons and Dragons game, but one of our players got very busy, so we're now running a tandem Slugblaster campaign
awesome.
whenever she can't make it to sessions, we're doing Slugblaster.
Oh,
and I'm
that's cool. What a great way to do that. That's awesome.
Very fun.
Yeah, that's cool. I love that.
Well, thank you so much. That brings us to the end of the interview. Thank you so much for your time. We had a spectacular time with the game, and this was incredible to hear all about. So,
thank you for having me. I've had a great time talking to you. So,
well, thank you to everyone listening as well, and we'll see you at a different table.